You guys all know me, and this is my friend Ricky. Now Ricky's a professional varnisher, unlike me. I'm a learn to varnish kind of guy here, and I'm gonna pick up some tricks from Ricky. Ricky and I go way back, and he's really varnished some great stuff. I don't know what really attracts him to this particular boat right here, but I guess it's a little different, you know, it's not a yacht, you know, and this is kind of Lou's Learn to Varnish shop right here, as a matter of fact. And so I'm gonna pick up some tricks and probably put some coats on it myself too. But the first thing we're going to do is really jump into some sanding, because it's not completely sanded yet. We have some corners to round, you know, the underside of the inwale we're rounding with a plane actually, and then sanding that out, because we just don't want any real sharp corners and things. But you know, we're really happy to have Ricky here with us today, because we get together like this and work together, and we have a lot of fun, and always a little bit of fun afterwards too. So we're going to get together and sand with 80 weight paper here. I've been sanding quite a bit of it already, but you know, now we're going to just check everything. That's a lot of blade out there. Just back up a little tiny bit. I'm going to pick up a round bottom spoke shave and work at these quarter knees a little bit, because we don't want to just have to grind at it with sandpaper. I like to take a tool to things first, and then we'll sand it afterwards. So I'm going to round at them and go one direction and the other direction, whichever direction doesn't pick up the grain and kind of mess it up. It's got to cut nice and smooth in one direction and maybe not so smooth in another direction. So as you're going along, you figure that out real quickly. And as it gets a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, that's more important, because you don't want to chip it, you know, when you're trying to finish it. So, you know, this is the tool to use, but you could have a little bit of know-how with this thing, and they feel better and everything if they're rounded. So that's what we have to do. Get a little aggressive with that underneath there. Now Ricky's following me up there with a piece of 80 weight paper, making me look good around these corners on the quarter knees here. And once it's all completed and we feel it and it feels good, we'll stop working on that. Yeah, you know what? I can get that with a scraper, Ricky, I think. I don't know if I can or not. What do you think, Ricky? A piece of 220? Yes. Before we clean up? And we can do the corners where we rounded and all the flat spots and everything. Wow. As I'm doing this final sand with 220, I'm really getting my other hand involved at the same time. I'm almost making as many strokes with that as I am with the sandpaper. The whole idea is that I really have to feel what I'm sanding. I don't want the grain sticking up, and the 220 kind of rips down all of that fuzzy grain and everything, smooths it out really nice. It's the way to go. You don't want to be varnishing over it if you only sanded it with 80 weight paper. Now I'm going to brush it off quickly and then wipe it down with alcohol and a nice clean rag, and go over it a couple times, and we just get it as clean as we can without fussing with it too much, because it won't matter if we get a little dust or anything in the first coat. It's just a sealer coat. We're just about ready to start varnishing, but before we do that, I want to show you the top sides. Now I've worked at the top sides quite a bit, and it's actually been a pleasure. I did it all by hand. It came out really, really nice. There's quite a few coats on there, a couple of coats of epoxy primer, and then 3 or 4 coats of topside paint, and really came out smooth. And I think it looks great, but before I let the boat out the door, I'm actually going to sand it one more time and put one more coat of topside paint on it, maybe a little bit thinner than this, because I've got it all covered, and now I just want to get that last shine on it before it goes. But we're ready to start varnishing, like I said, and we're going to apply varnish to this whole surface, and we're going to thin it so it gets a nice penetration in there. And the first coat really is not anything that we have to protect or we have to worry about sanding through or anything like that. It's really like a storyteller. It shows all of the imperfections, and it really is going to make the thing pop. And I think it's really going to be a pleasure to put it on. It's really going to be fun, especially in the camera. But like I said, there's going to be some other work. I had put plugs in up here on the top, and I put them into a shellac, and I had one time trying to get that shellac stain out of the oak around those plugs. So I'm not going to fall for that again, because this has all been sanded already, and what we're going to do is apply one thin coat of varnish on there to seal it up before I shellac the plugs in and whittle them off. That way I won't get a stain there that looks any different color than the varnish itself. So we're ready to go. We're going to head over to the varnish table. For varnish, we're using TotalBoat Lust. Now this stuff dries really quickly, and we really like that because you can coat over it in 1 hour if that's the way you like doing it, building coats, you know, right away. But this is our first coat, so we're going to mix the varnish with TotalBoat Special Brush and Thinner 100, 50% of each. And the whole idea is to thin it down and get it to take to the surface, soak right in, and get a grip on it. Ricky's just going to mix that up with a stick a little bit and then take his brush and bang that around a little bit and knock some of the bristles out of it that might come loose, and then we're going to head over to the boat. This first coat is really just a sealer. It's thinned down so much that it soaks into the surface, but when you first apply it, it's laying on the top and you get a nice glossy look like you had 4 or 5 coats on there, and it allows you to see right through it and see if you've got any blemishes in the wood or scratches or anything like that, or anything you want to fix or anything. But after this coat is dry, it's so soaked in, that's the time to fix any of these errors. You can go around, sand right through this coat, doesn't mean a thing. You know, you can plane it, we can put the plugs in the way I said without staining around the plug holes and all kinds of different things like that. So Ricky started up forward and going right down the port side, and it's just going on really nice. No problems at all. We haven't really found any blemishes or anything we want to fix yet. I'm sure we will at some point, but it's really starting to look good now. I'm following Ricky around here with a piece of cardboard on the inside because I don't want any varnish dripping on the inside of the boat or on the bottom inside. And Ricky's pretty good at it here, but with a chip brush like that, you know, it wouldn't be hard to make a drip. So I don't think this is an embarrassment at all. This is just what we need to do, and it saved us an whole lot of labor. We didn't want to have to tape it all off and then hang plastic or paper or something inside, so we just kind of chase it around here with a piece of cardboard. Works fantastic. Ricky's there on the port quarter knee applying varnish right now, and it looks really nice. He's been over there for quite a while. I don't know exactly why. I just don't think he wants to leave. It looks so good. You can tell that Ricky's got experienced hands here because he's not dripping any varnish on the side of the boat. There isn't any varnish running down the side of the brush, which is amazing to me because those chip brushes don't hold much varnish. We haven't spilled any varnish inside the boat, and there's just no runs, no drips, no errors, and it's just going great right along, and it's actually going quite quickly, although it seems like he's being very, very patient doing it. It's just getting done. Well, we're going to spread the first coat of varnish on this quarter knee here, and boy, I'll tell you what, the grain is going to pop. It just looks fantastic. I think it was so worthwhile to have gone after this material because, you know, it just has such a better look than straight grain. I mean, every skiff I ever built just had straight grain going across in that direction, and it was all fine. You know, just perfectly fine. But this has got like a little style to it that was missing out of some of those boats. So I think I did the right thing. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, the oak in those knees is pretty dense, and they didn't shrink much. All that steaming of them and all of that stuff was, I believe, worthwhile. There's probably some scratches or something here and there, but I'll tell you what, it looks great. It's really not in the style of a workboat like this, I don't think at all, but it's making me smile anyhow. And I think it's great that people can get a look at the woodwork and everything and see how good it looks and the quality of the material and stuff like that. So it's great to put a coat of varnish or varnish it the first couple of years. And if somebody wants to maintain it, it'll be great. If not, well, they can paint it. I would say that enhances the look of it. It really brings the grain out. Wow, it looks great. I've always liked oak varnished. The caps here, the grain is following them right around. It's the side cuts off the timber that we sawed to build the skiff. The first piece is off for the side cuts, and that's what the cap rails are. And the in-wales are nice quarter sawn material. Ricky's just finishing up on the starboard side up forward, and it looks awesome to me. It's not a look that I'm used to seeing, because we used to paint the gunwales all out, you know, or just oil them and they would turn black. But this has really got a finished look, yacht fashion. We wanted to get a real generous supply of varnish on the cap itself, because it's not going to run very much or do anything like that. It might puddle a little tiny bit on the outboard edge, and that's the whole idea of tipping the cap again, is to just respread the varnish that we've already put on there and maybe pull it over onto some of the drier areas a little bit. But we don't want any thick varnish and soaked in spots and thick spots or anything like that. It's meant to soak right in. So that's our first coat of TotalBoat Lust, and it really looks great on the boat, on the cap rails. The whole gunnel looks fantastic, but especially the quarter knees and the breast hook. To stand here and look at that grain just pop right up through the varnish, we know what it's going to look like when we get 3 or 4 more coats on it. So we've let our first coat of thinned Lust dry overnight, and here it is right here. It's dry as a bone, and you can touch it. It's not sticky or anything like that. We're going to sand it one time with some 220 on a rubber block, and it'll take that fuzz out of it there. That actually what it is the wood grain popped up like this. It's the wood itself is what you're feeling. It feels like there's dirt in it or dust in it, but there isn't. That's the wood itself sticking up through the grain, through the varnish. So what we're going to do, sand that one real quick like. And I've already sanded the other side. Sands perfectly, doesn't clog the paper. Works fantastic, but before we get involved with any of that, making dust over here, we're gonna plug these holes. Now I've got my drill press set up with the table up as high as I can get it, because that makes it so my arbor doesn't wobble at all, because it's kind of like a light duty drill press here, but it works great. And I've got a 5/8 inch plug cutter in the arbor here, in the chuck. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drill plugs out of this piece of material right here. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rub the wood with beeswax, because I want a little bit of beeswax to deposit on this thing as it's drilling, because it stops it from squealing and it makes it drill a lot easier, and it really works good. I drilled a number of them without it and a number of them with it, and believe me, this works good. So it's kind of a new idea, but I like it. So what I'm going to do is just give this surface a little rub down with this piece of beeswax, like so. You can barely see it on there, but it's on there. When you're drilling like a narrow piece like this, you want to make sure there's nothing underneath it or anything like that, because you don't want it to rock around on the table. If it's not stable on top of the table, what'll happen is the plugs will come out kind of a funny shape. So you get the thing nice and still, hold it down tight. You know, you don't have to clamp it down or anything like that, because you're going to keep moving it. You'll notice when I pull the drill press down, I'm not drilling all the way down on one stroke. What I'm doing is backing off, because the plug cutter will load up too much and it creates too much heat, and it really doesn't cut that well. So what happens is you drill in, you back off, it ejects, and then you do the rest of the drilling in the second stroke or the third stroke even. Sometimes I back off twice. You want to make sure that you push all the way down, because the plug cutter is designed so that if you bottom it out, it creates that little rounded edge on that end of the plug that makes it go into the hole so easily. We're finishing up drilling this piece out right here, and we've squeezed out as many plugs as I like to get out of it without overlapping the holes, one over top of the other. Because what happens there is it makes the cutter want to drift sideways a little bit, and then you get funny shaped plugs again. So I don't need to squeeze the maximum amount out of this piece. What I need to do is have them come out as good as possible. At this point, the plugs are still connected to the piece that I was drilling them out of. I have to cut them loose from it in the bandsaw. So what I'm going to do is stand the piece up on edge and just rip it through. I don't need a line or anything. It's about maybe 9/16 of an inch from the edge, and you can see very clearly that they come loose as they go by the bandsaw blade. And if I don't go too fast, they don't fall out, but a few of them will fall out. But it's nice if they stay right in there, because then you can retrieve the piece and just dump them on the table right there, all nice and neat, and I don't have to lean over and pick them up off the floor. But you can clearly see on these plugs that one end has got a chamfered edge, a rounded end, and the other end is perfectly square. There's a 5/8 inch plug right there, and you can see that on one end of it, it's rounded. That's because I've pushed the plug cutter all the way in and left that end like that. This is the end I cut off with the bandsaw when they popped out of the piece of wood like so. And you can see the grain in it and everything else, and what's going to happen is I'm going to dip it in some shellac. I'm going to paint the inside of the hole, and I'm just going to put it right up in there like that. And that rounded end makes it stick. Now, if I would try to put it in the other way, I probably couldn't even get it to stay there, because it's actually bigger than the hole on this end. So as you push it in, it gets tighter and tighter, and really, they cut quite nicely actually, because there's no space showing around them after you push them in and clip them off. They're really nicely tight fit. I'm taking an acid brush here and shortening the bristles up with a chisel about half the length that they are, and then I stand the brush up and rock it back and forth and bend the bristles back and forth so it splayles the bristles out a little bit, and it just makes it easier for me to use it to paint the inside of the holes where the plugs are going to go. We're just going to put a little shellac in each hole, and we're going to wipe off anything that's running out of there with a rag. I've got a rag handy all the time. And then I'm going to dip the end of the plug in the shellac, the rounded end, and put it in and just tap it right in. You've got to line the grain up as best you can, and then tap it in with the handle of your chisel. Because we put that sealer on the boat this time and sealed all the way around the holes and even in the holes, when I tap the plugs in with the shellac on them, it just doesn't make any stain around the hole at all. You take a rag, wipe it right off, and it's perfectly clean. Now I'm using a chisel to cut the plugs right down to the surface, and the way I do it is I use kind of a large chisel really, and I slide it along on the heel of the chisel, and so that the cutting edge is not down against the surface like this. I want to cut the plug off a little high so that I can see the grain in the plug. So I'm going to get some momentum and slam right into it and cut it off like that. Now I'm looking at the grain as I cut it down, and it's still facing uphill, so I can raise my handle and get the cutting edge right down near the surface and make the last cut just like that. Now I've finished up knocking the last few plugs off the starboard side, and we don't want to get it down there too close because we could damage the wood if we made even the slightest mistake. So what you do is you take a piece of 80 sandpaper and you just rub over it with 80 sandpaper. It doesn't take many strokes, and what happens is it comes out nice and smooth and flat, and there'll be no evidence really whatsoever of those plugs by feel. If you were to rub your thumb over it or anything like that, that's the way you want them, so you can't really even tell they're there. We've got a few more holes to fill here on the gunnel, but inside and out, but we've got that one coat of sealer on there, and it really looks good just like that. That's probably what it would look like, kind of oiled, but it wouldn't last like the varnish is going to last. We're going to build that up with a number of more coats, and the boat's starting to look fantastic. I think in general, people think that painting and varnishing really isn't a whole lot of fun. And you know, I've heard that from a lot of people. Well, I think it's because of frustration about maybe not knowing exactly what you're doing or having the wrong conditions or something like that. But if you have the right products and you know, you've got a little practice and a little bit of knowledge behind you, you can do work like this pretty easily, and it's really satisfying. It's fantastic to me. I have a lot of fun doing this type of work right here. It's not the type of work I do every day, but I'll tell you what, when I get a chance to do it, I have nothing but fun doing it.